Hello, BookTube. As you know, if you watch this channel, I watch a lot of BookTube. I watch a lot of YouTube just in general, but I watch a lot of BookTube. I don't do that watching as conscientiously as I should. I should leave comments on videos. Every video that I watch, I should. Because I know that for real people, for genuine people, that's what we're here for. It's only the phony balonies who religiously don't read their comments section. Otherwise, we do. We're here for the interaction, the conversations. And I should do that, but I don't. I don't. I can work on it. But I do watch a lot of BookTube. And recently, a whole bunch of BookTube channels that I watch, that I subscribe to, have been bombarding me with book lists of one kind or another. And I thought, instead of just suffering in silence, we would go through some of those book lists together. And I'll leave links to the channels, which you should go and subscribe. They are well worth your time. The first one up will be Gina Stanyer. I've got a long list. There's like 50 books here, so I have a long list here. The first up is Gina Stanyer, who I've mentioned on this channel many times. Of course, most of you know Gina. She is our queen of cozy here on this corner of BookTube. And she came out with she made a video just recently. Her most recent video was a list of books that she's recently read or is starting. I thought we'd go through them. The first of them was Romeo and Juliet, which she read for Shaketober. Yes, it sounds like she has a really nice local Shakespeare in the Park production. That's kind of nice. You bring a picnic, anything to take your mind off Shakespeare. But Romeo and Juliet, of course, is excellent. Then she read Jane Eyre and really liked it. That's good. Very good to hear. Then a little cozy novel that I read, and I don't think my exact reaction was, Gina would love this. I don't think that I actually thought that. But I did sort of roll my eyes because it's extremely cutesy-poo. It's The Littlest Library by Poppy Alexander. It's meet cute, it's court cute, it's trouble cute, it's resolve cute, it's end cute, it's read cute, it's talk cute, it's order food cute, it's everything cute. And I think I hit cute overload. I guess maybe I did. We don't really do cute on M Street in South Boston. But I'm learning. Then the next one, talk about a match made in heaven. There were two authors that Gina mentioned in her video that are matches made in heaven for her reading taste. And this is the first one, Mary Stewart. Madam, Will You Talk? Mary Stewart is a kind of an antiquated choice nowadays. Big surprise to find it on Gina's channel. She is best known now for her 4 books of Arthurian retelling. A trilogy of Arthurian retellings, and then they did so well that she was induced to do a 4th book, The Wicked Day, about Mordred and the betrayal of Arthur. She's best known for those books, and that is kind of strange because they are tonally completely different from all the normal contemporary novels that she wrote for her whole career. And the normal contemporary, I'm sorry to see that the normal contemporary novels are largely gone because they're wonderful. I've mentioned on this channel before This Rough Magic, but Madam, Will You Talk is wonderful as well, and Gina read it and loved it, and I predict that I made a prediction on her video that she's going to love all the others as well, but not the Arthurian books. I'd be willing to bet she won't like the Arthurian books. We'll see if I'm right. She also read an Anthony Trollope. She read The Belmont Estate, which I can strongly recommend. I recommend virtually all of Trollope. The Belmont Estate has a terrific central plot. It has a terrific supporting plot. It has Trollope has like a small menu of tics that he has that are very annoying. It's a really bad, you're in for a bad reading experience if he does a lot of those tics in one book. He only does one of them in this book. He has a bunch of tics. He's fond of a syrupy love story. Not just a love story, but a syrupy one. He's fond of writing rude mechanicals, poor people, and writing them in dialect. He's not good at it, and his condescension is pretty palpable, so it gets pretty bad. Of course, one of his regular tics is wonderful. One of his regular tics is glorious. He quickly became known as a fox-hunting novelist. He quickly became known as that if you got the new Trollope, it would have a glorious fox-hunting scene at some point in its length. And you would probably think that I would hate that, because fox-hunting is lose-lose as far as I'm concerned. It's my babies hunting my babies to kill my babies. I don't agree with it at all. But Trollope writes the heck out of those scenes. And I'm happy to report the Belton Estate has only one Trollope tick, and it is relatively under control. So I'm glad that Gina liked it. Then, talk about another match made in heaven. She read Wild Strawberries by Angela Thurkell. Everything, every novel. Angela Thurkel wrote like 100 novels, and every novel that she wrote, Gina Stanyer is going to love. Every single one of them. She is in for a lifetime of never disliking a novel by this author. Never. That's pretty nice. And I recently did a lot of rereading of Angela Thurkel, and I really want to stress that her books are really good. They're really, really good. She's well worth a rediscovery. So that was Gina Staner, except that she also mentioned that she's starting Return of the Native. I think I know how that's going to go, but I'll wait for an update from her. Then we move on to Michael K Vaughan, who did a video about 12 books on his TBR. I thought we'd go through those. He mentions, for instance, this one, Lord of a Shattered Land by Howard Andrew Jones. Apparently, as you're going to see in the course of this video, Howard Andrew Jones is sending out copies of Lord of the Shattered Land and its sequel to all the cool kids on BookTube. I haven't received a copy. I had to read this the old-fashioned way, like a common bridge troll, and I thought it was quite good. But it's not the last time that it will come up. Then Michael mentioned that he is reading The Talisman by Stephen King and Peter Straub in his mystifying quest to read every book by Stephen King. I really do not understand that. I really do not. You could also go on a quest to eat every piece of poop that is deposited in the toilet of your block in the course of a given year. You could do that. Check with the neighbors. Make sure they don't throw anything away. You're going to get every piece of poop in every toilet. But why would you do that? Why would you do that? That is an obviously counterproductive quest. I read The Talisman when it came out in a big fat paperback, and I noticed one thing about it more than anything else, which is that it seemed roughly 50% good. I wonder why that is. Then, because it's Michael K Vaughan, of course, you're going to get lots of pulp. His next thing on his TBR is The Black Master, The Shadow, The Black Master, with this great old Jim Steranko cover. I'm sure that I've read this. I had all of these Pinnacle paperbacks of The Shadow once upon a time and read them all. I'm sure that I've read this, but it blurs on me. I'm not sure that I'm never going to reread it, and I'm not sure that I could recount anything of the plot here. I feel certain that I read it. I did read this next one. This next one was a mass market paperback anthology that I bought at a bookstore. I was working at a bookstore. This is Between Time and Terror, a relatively generous anthology of science fiction horror that I liked. I remember liking this quite a bit. I'll never see the paperback again, never in a million years. But I remember liking this quite a bit. And there's one story in here that I mean, you've got all the huge names in this book, but there's one story in here that I want to sort of champion just a little. It's by David Morrell, late of Iowa City, the creator of Rambo. And I hate saying the creator of Rambo because there's so much more to this writer, and it will never be known. It will be carved on his gravestone that he created Rambo, and he knows that. And that's a shame, because a lot of what he writes is really, really good. The story in this book, his story in this book, is conspicuously better than most of the stories by most of the more recognizable names. And he also did relatively recently, he did a series of murder mysteries starring, of all people, Thomas de Quincey, the author of Confessions of an English Opium Eater. And it's really good. That whole series is really, really good. The less likely sleuth you will never find, but they were enjoyable. So I was glad to see this on the TBR. Then Michael K Vaughan showed, the next thing he showed on his TBR, every time he mentions, either on camera or now in person, that he hasn't read this book, I want to throw up. That is The Anubis Gates by Tim Powers. He still has not read this thing. No matter how much I browbeat him, and there's another book on his list that he also hasn't read, no matter how much I browbeat him, no matter how much other people browbeat him. You know how hard you have to work to get some of the fantasy booktubers to browbeat you at all? I will put a vote in here. The Anubis Gates is really, really good. Well worth your time. Then we go back to pulp with The Meteor Menace by Doc Savage. A Doc Savage novel, not by Doc Savage. Although I'm sure that Clark Savage also wrote books and was brilliant at it. I read The Meteor Menace when it came out. I had all of these mass markets when they came out. I was just popping them down like Pez. The Meteor Menace is not good. And the reason that you might think all Doc Savage is not good, but there's Doc Savage and there's Doc Savage. And a lot of times the writer, whoever it was that wrote this thing, that wrote it in an hour on a manual typewriter, whoever it was that did that, there's always a temptation with Doc Savage to concentrate on his merry band of assistants. And the merry bands of assistants are 1930s stereotypes. They are very, very, very boring. Once you know the stereotype, you know the whole thing. And that is very, very boring. And their antics and them getting slugged on the head and them figuring out things and talking in their Brooklyn patois or whatever, it's all so just tedious in the extreme. Whereas the main character, Clark Savage, is unbelievably interesting. It is maddening how much you often have to dig around in a Doc Savage adventure to get Doc Savage. That is maddening. Actually, a lot happens with the Shadow as well. And I might point out that these two are the king of pulp adventure heroes, the Shadow and Doc Savage. I might point out that their rip-off template characters were also the titans of the comic book era. The Batman for the Shadow and Superman for Doc Savage. I know that if you're familiar with Doc Savage only from the dumb Ron Ely TV movie, then you probably are under the impression that he's bulletproof. He's not. He's not bulletproof. But he is basically superhuman. Think, for you later comic book fans who've never read Doc Savage and don't know him, think Ozymandias from The Watchmen. He's basically superhuman. He has trained himself to such an extent of human perfection that, and also he's big, he's bigger than anybody else, that you don't know quite what the limits of his capability are. And so, it'd be nice if he starred in his own books, but he doesn't always do that. Michael K. Vaughan notwithstanding, I would tell you that unless you're a diehard pulp fan, avoid this. Oh God, okay, well, diehard fans. We'll do the next one as well. This is Edgar Ice Barrows. Michael K. Vaughan is working his way through all of Edgar Ice Barrows in roughly publication order, and here he's getting up to The Rider. He mentions this great brooding Frank Frazetta cover, and I want to stress what he will not stress, which is that the cover is literally the only good thing about this book. It's unreadable wetwash. Otherwise, I mean, let's be honest. The pulp writers, the writers of the descendants of the pulp era, whatever, they were writing by the inch, they were writing by the page, they were writing compulsively for money. This was true for Edgar Ice Barrows, very much so, and it shows in this book. So I don't know what his verdict will be on this thing, but don't mistake it for a lost classic. Edgar Ice Barrows didn't write any classics, much less lost classics. But you take what you can get. Then we have something that comes from Michael K. Vaughan's recent trip to Boston. He came to visit Hyde Cottage. He got screamed at and mauled by my little bean. And in one of the used bookstores that we went to, he found Empire of the East by Fred Saberhagen. I mentioned this on the video that we did as a book haul. I mentioned that he came up to me in the used book superstore and asked me if this was any good, and I said it was. And I was right on the tip of my tongue was the caution that I've given to many people over the decades who've asked me if this is any good. I was automatically going to say, but you should probably know that it's a little bit gimmicky and also heavily plot driven. Then I remembered who I'm talking to. And of course, those are selling points. So I'd be willing. This is actually 3 short novels in one book, and I'd be willing to bet he's going to love it. I think he will. One of the 3 books is much better than the other 2. I think he'll probably come to that conclusion, but you never know. Then he's reading Hornblower. He's reading all of C.S. Forester's Hornblower. He's up to Lieutenant Hornblower, the Lieutenant Hornblower Saga. These are the 3 books that are typically known as Young Hornblower. So before he's captain. When he's lieutenant, he still has quite a bit of adventures, an enormous number of adventures, actually, and it's terrific stuff. Then we get to an anthology. Donald Wollheim did a million anthologies. Oh my God, he was always working on at least 3. He did an anthology about 1 million years ago when paperback books were 40 cents called Swordsman in the Sky with a Frazetta cover. This is a collection of sword and sandals, sword and planet, sword and sorcery short stories, and it's very uneven. I know that's a favorite thing for people to say about anthologies. This is very uneven. There are 2 stories in here that are terrific, and the rest are make weight, and one of the 2 stories that are terrific, one of them is much better than the other. I'd be willing to bet, knowing how Don Wollheim worked, I'd be willing to bet that he got that story somehow from the author, saw it in a periodical, whatever. That he got that story, read it, was wowed by it, because no matter how many times he put his name on an anthology, he kept his good stuff instincts very sharp throughout his life. He did not. Stockholm Syndrome never took hold in Donald Walheim. He was always willing, in his own person and in private, he was always willing to say, yeah, this is really, really good, and the rest of the stuff is not. I'd be willing to bet that this whole little anthology arose by the fact that he saw that story, read it, loved it, and thought, I've got to print this. And just, it canvassed around for other stuff to include with it. I'd be willing to bet that's the origin story. Then we have vampire fiction. No idea why Mike is reading this. This is by Jean Calogridis. This is Covenant with the Vampire. I read this whole series as they were coming out in mass market paperbacks. I thought they were singularly unimpressive. And I'd be willing to bet, I'll go out on a bet here. I'm not handicapping the horses here in all these lists, but I'd be willing to bet. I mean, if there's anybody on BookTube who's a bigger fan of Bram Stoker's Dracula than I am, it's Michael K. Vaughan. I'd be willing to bet that he's going to read this and say, okay, all right, but maybe I should just reread Dracula. We'll see. He could be a big fan. It has lots of fans. Then we have another book that I just want to say, what are you thinking? Why have you not read this yet? Mythago Wood by Robert Holstock. This is a classic of fantasy. It has been designated as such by being in the Modern Fantasy Classic series. I can't predict off the top of my head what Mike will make of this, but I think he'll certainly recognize, its greatness. Then the next one is more pulp. He found a paperback of Black Bat by Norman Daniels, although Norman Daniels was certainly a pen name, and who knows who wrote Black Bat or how many stories there were, or how many hands were involved. This is the kind of pulp that Michael K. Vaughan is known for and really likes. And then that was his list. Then we'll move on to Liam's Lyceum, he has a regular feature on his channel, Liam's Leapings, where he just talks about stuff that he's read recently. It boiled down to a book list. So I'll give you the highlights here. The first one was Worldbinder by David Farland. This is, I think, book number 6 in this series by this author, and I recently found a whole bunch of books in this series, but I did not find this one or the next one. I don't have those except as ebooks. So I haven't got this far. My surly houseboy has actually read a couple of books in this series, and so has one other fantasy reader that I know who's read them all many times and says that they get better as they go along. High praise, we'll see. Then the next thing on Liam's list was Stoner by John Williams. I'm pleased to report that he was not wowed, nor did he say that he was wowed. The reason why I seem so sardonic about this book is because it is an absolute beloved favorite of the Dude Bros. They love this book. Absolutely love it. Mainly, we don't need to go over my tirade against Dude Bro Lit, but mainly because there are no women. It isn't even established in the course of the novel that its main character, Stoner, was born of a woman. I think he was probably just born from multiple readings of the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. This is for some weird reason, not only because the title is the name of a character, but it's also a description of a lot of the people who read this book. For whatever strange group of reasons, this has been embraced by the Dude Bro culture. So I always sigh a little when I see someone bringing it up on their book list. Fortunately, Liam didn't, praise it over the moon. Then we have Christopher Rocchio. This is the Dregs of Empire. I gather that Liam knows this author and is working or has worked on manuscripts as a proofreader. That's terrific. I've only read one of this author's books. I think I've only read the first of the Sun Eater books. And I liked it. Very, very dense, wonderfully, it wraps all around you space opera. Definitely intelligent space opera. Then he also mentions the case of Charles Dexter Ward, an H.P. Lovecraft story that I've read all of Lovecraft. I occasionally am tempted, especially when I watch one of Michael K. Vaughan's great videos on Lovecraft. I'm occasionally tempted to give this author a systematic reread. I have 4 systematic rereads that I will do in 2024 if I'm here, if I'm the same, if I return to books, if I still want to do systematic rereads, if all the ifs, there are no continuations from one year to the other. So I don't know, but if I do and those plans stay, I already have a few systematic rereads. I'm not sure that I want to do it for Lovecraft. I've read Lovecraft. I read, for instance, this mass market paperback. When it came out, I reread these things, and they don't do anything for me. And then this next one, it's an author I tend to like, but this thing didn't do anything for me at all. This is A Night in the Lonesome October I've got extremely inconsistent lighting here, so it's a crowded cover with a whole bunch of literary figures on there. There's Sherlock Holmes and Bela Lugosi's Dracula and whatnot. This book is the embodiment of twee. It's the embodiment of what NaNoWriMo refers to as seat of the pants writing. I found it unbelievably tedious. I think that Liam is probably reading it in the piecemeal fashion that was intended. Maybe that makes a difference. There's no way on earth I was going to do that for this thing. No way on earth. So, I wish him well. I hope he likes it. Then it was science fiction, book 3 in a series by Joel Shepard called Kill Switch, a Cassandra Cresno novel. I believe I read the first one of these. I would have to check my reading journal, but I think I did. I haven't read any of the others. But this is, the covers are really well designed. And the cover design is something that I recognize. So I think the cover for number 1 probably looked a lot like this. I'm pretty sure that it's on an e-reader of mine somewhere. Then a book that I have read, Guy Gavriel Kay. I think I've read pretty much everything that this author has written. I really like his work. This is The Last Light of the Sun. One of his... They're historical fiction, but not really, because he changes all the names and some of the details. If you've read his Sarantium book, then you know what you're getting into here. This is basically the time of King Alfred and, the invading Vikings and whatnot. A great story that always makes me wonder. I've always wondered. I've never actually asked this author, but I've always wondered, why do you do this? Why don't you just write historical fiction? Why don't you include the characters? I have a feeling his answer would be because he wants to add an element of active fantasy. And if that were his answer, my rejoinder for decades has always been, why not just add it? Why not just add it to historical fiction with the actual characters, with King Alfred? But no, no. But I read this a while ago. I remember really liking it. And that, I think, is Liam's Lyceum. Is that right? I think I jotted down a few other things here. Last Light, Kill Switch. Oh, yeah, a couple of other things. He's reading his way through the Big Book of Cyberpunk, which we've seen on this channel. Pretty good anthology. I'm really enjoying it. And also, he has read City of Marble and Blood by Howard Andrew Jones, which is the sequel to Lord of a Shattered Land. So, Liam is one of the cool kids. He is getting books from this author. I am not. But that's okay, I guess. Maybe I smell. Then we move on to a long list from Stalking Kafka. And again, I'll leave links to all of these channels. I don't have covers to show you for this long list. She went to the Globe and Mail. The Globe and Mail made a list of 60-something books that you should read this autumn. And she concentrated on the fiction. Narrowed it down to 13 novels. And they were, let's see, a lot of them I have not read. A lot of them are canlit. Study for Obedience by Sarah Bernstein. Rouge by Mona Awad. Daughter by Claudia Day. The Observer by Marina Endicott. Wild Hope by Joan Thomas. The Circle by Katharina Vermette. Do You Remember Being Born by Shawn Michaels. Then we get to The Vaster Wilds by Lauren Groff, which I have read. The Most Secret Memory of Men by Mohammed Sarr. How to Build a Boat by Elaine Feeney, which I have read. The Fraud by Zadie Smith, which I have read. Her Body Among Animals by Paola Ferranti. Roman Stories by Jhumpa Lahiri, which I've read and very much liked. And Every Form of Love by Padma Vishnawathan, which I have not read. Most of these things on this list I have not read. I will if they come into publication in America, although I have to say I was disinclined to do a lot of that reading by some of the author talks, little snippets of author talks that Stalking Kafka included in her video. Because whenever she has a clip of an author opening a reading or talking about their book or whatever, I was not really induced to want to know that author any better by crawling around inside the effects of their imagination. But you never can tell. I've known plenty of authors who gave terrible readings. These authors, the ones that she had put clips up for, they just radiated ignorant, bigoted, entitled zillennial. They just radiated that. So I don't know if that'll be true. I don't know if that'll end up being the case. I always wary with lists like this, right? Contemporary fiction. is 9/10 ideologically captured, so you don't know what you're going to encounter. But I appreciate the heads up for the ones I'd never heard of. And then the last list we have is from Hey Y'all Listen Up. I'll leave a link to his channel. He does the same thing, just a roundup of recent reads. I do have pictures for these because he doesn't have 16 of them or whatever. The first one is Foundation and Empire, the second Foundation book by Isaac Asimov. And also on his list, he has Second Foundation, which confusingly is the third Foundation book. And the impression I get from his videos is that he liked them but didn't love them, which certainly fits with my own experience. Although my estimation of the Foundation books went up, thanks to, it was kicked off by a reread that I did at Mark Richardson's house up in Vermont. He had the Barnes & Noble, the beautiful leather-bound Barnes & Noble edition of these three books. And I started reading the first one, Foundation, there, and got caught up. I got caught up in that reread. Eventually went to Barnes & Noble here in Boston when there was one and bought a copy of that edition of my own. And my estimation went up. Talk about author ticks. There are Asimov author ticks all throughout all three of these books. The ticks get less in the third book, Second Foundation. The willingness of Asimov to write epic, which he never had. He always wanted to have it, but he never really had that skill or that desire. That instinct gets stronger in the third book in the series, and the series merits it, right? The ideas here of the Foundation books are epic in scope. It's a shame that so much of Foundation and Empire, or also Foundation itself, is set against an epic backdrop, but is written in the tone and tenor of a Brooklyn deli owner. Who's next? Who's got the next line? You got to be sure about doing this. Don't overweigh the package. It's always been a little bugaboo of mine for the Foundation books. Then the next book on his list was Half Human Heroes, an anthology of short stories edited by BookTube's own Jeremy Fee. A lot of other BookTubers are in here. Stories about heroes who have mixed bloodlines, human and something else. I guess we join here with what was his name again? Howard Andrew Jones. We join here in being a sort of anti-Steve project. I was not asked to contribute a story to this. I will not be asked to contribute a story to the next one. I have read Half-Hearted Heroes, and like all anthologies, it has ups and downs. I would never in a million years bring formal reviewing chops to this book on camera as part of BookTube. I would never do that. For me, BookTube is much more the community than the books. That's why I don't do book reviews on this channel. I would certainly not do that for a book that has many stories by people whose channels I have watched for a long time, and not in a million years. But this is well worth your time. If you like fantasy, this is well worth your time. What did he have next? Yes, a BookTube darling. One of those elusive books, the BookTube darlings. This is Travis Baldry's Legends and Lattes. Hey Y'all Listen Up read this, and he made a very vague reference to the fact that it does some things that contemporary fantasy is more and more doing, increasingly doing. He doesn't mention what those things are, and I have no idea. I'm not putting words in his mouth, but I went into this with my guard up because I had a feeling that it would do a couple of things that modern literature, not just fantasy, but modern literature just in general, does. I went in specifically looking for the answer to one question. Are all the male characters in this book stupid, incompetent, evil, or all three? And are they any one of those three or all three solely because they are men? Solely because they are men. They are either stupid, evil, or incompetent. Not because of how they were raised, or what their goals are in life, or how they treat the heroines, but simply because they are men. Well, so-and-so, such and such a character is a man, so he is either stupid, incompetent, or evil. I went into this book looking for that because I have to say, I know that such bigotries are now absolutely common coin in the 21st century. People just start their conversation with, what kind of Jew they don't like, what kind of black person they don't like, only they don't see it that way. As far as they're concerned, there is a group that you can simply denigrate as a group, but you can do it. It's free to do because it's allowed because it's white and men. and cis and whatnot. All you know what I'm talking about. Those bigotries are not only allowed but compulsory in a lot of academia, in a lot of the corporate world. You have to declare that you hate those things. When that's bigotry, that is prejudice, of course. Bigotry is hating a group of people because of traits that they were born to and they did not opt to have, and also characterizing a group of people in denigrating terms as a group. So you are such and such. You are, a Pole, so you will be X, Y, and Z. There are no exceptions to that. The standard refrain, the standard excuse of bigots throughout time has been, oh, well, with this group, it's okay to do that. That is not true. There are no exceptions. That is still bigotry. And I went into this book looking for that. Apart from other things, apart from, the one punch girl who's the key to everything, you're standing there, you're checking your cell phone, of course, or the medieval fantasy equivalent, as a gigantic horde of mercenaries is bearing down on you. And you're not really paying much attention to them, and then when they get close, you just flick them away. I was looking for stuff like that. The one-punch girl is the key to everything. But the main thing I was looking for here is sexism. What I'm talking about here is sexism. I'm talking about an author who's saying there's one whole sex that is either evil or stupid or incompetent or all three because of its sex. And there might be exceptions. There might be members of that sex who are at least the good guys in this book, but they will be weak. They will be ineffective. They will need to be rescued. They will be, in the end, redundant. And, well, I don't want to give this book any extra length of time in a long list. We have other books to do. Let's just be nice and say, if you've read this book, you can tell me whether or not you think that happens. Let's just hurry on here. We got a couple more books to do for Hey, y'all, listen up. Like this one, William Forstner's book, 1 Second After, which is a post-apocalyptic book in which the apocalypse is man-made. There is an EMP that knocks out the whole world. And this book its action takes place 1 second after that EMP. And there are sequels to this. 1 day after, I think, 1 year after. These are really enjoyable page turners in terms of what would happen if, according to, as the prepper community puts it, the you-know-what hit the fan. The prepper community is bracing for this very thing, an EMP, whether it's natural, caused by a solar prominence, or whether it's man-made, as an act of war. What would you do? What would you do if there was an EMP, that stands for electromagnetic pulse, that knocks out all of the energy products that you have all around you? What would you do? Are you ready for that? Are you prepped for that? This book is very popular with the prepper community. They consider it to be wannabe stage window dressing. They don't consider it to be down in the weeds of prepping. I think the preppers' main problem with this book is that one of the main fantasies that they have of when the you-know-what hits the fan is a little bit downplayed in this. It is present in this first book, but it's a little bit downplayed. One of the big elements that they harp on is defense. In most diehard preppers' kits, there's not just military rations and water filters and a compass and a medical kit and a transistor radio and batteries in sealed plastic and whatnot, and how to make fire, something that makes fire in sealed plastic. In their kits, there's not just that. There's also a gun. Because in their fantasies, in their extrapolations of what happens when the you-know-what hits the fan, in addition to you being able to live on your own with shelter and food and warmth, there are also going to be people who are going to want what you have, and you need to defend it. You need to defend the hordes of your neighbors who did not prepare when you did. I think that the objection that preppers tend to have to this series is that it doesn't emphasize that enough. But it is in here, and I think the series is really good. Certainly it will get you thinking about prepping. The unfortunate thing about prepping, about the whole subject, is that it is tainted by late-night comedians and serious sociological studies as being just equated with being a nut job. And that isn't true. Unfortunately, there's no way to separate those two things. So when the subject comes up, people will start to laugh. And okay, all right, fine. I realize that there are comic elements in the people who really, really worship prepping. Nevertheless, it's not a crackpot subject. You are incredibly vulnerable. have you taken any steps to mitigate that vulnerability? You're not just planning on dying, are you? Right? Have you taken any steps to mitigate your vulnerability? The electromagnetic grid, the electric grid, the food supply distribution, the water distribution in America, for instance, where the bulk of my listeners are, I bet, is incredibly vulnerable. Huge amounts of the physical plant are antiquated. They're falling apart. Most of the physical plant elements are not guarded, or are guarded by, Jack, who's a middle school teacher for most of his days, and gets a gig guarding, the water distribution plant on the weekends. And there's also solar prominences, which, think of a solar prominence as you've got a basketball, and it's covered in water. It's soaking wet with water. It's at one end of a football field, and you've got a marble all the way at the other end of the football field, the other end zone. The idea of a solar prominence here is you take that soaking wet basketball and you start spinning it, and it starts flying off shoots of water. Little jets of water come shooting off that basketball. As you can tell, when you think about it that way, the chances of one of those jets actually arcing all the way across the football field and striking that marble are very small. The chances are very small that will happen. But they're not non-existent. If a massive solar pulse, there was one just recently that took out a lot of the power supply in Canada. If a massive solar prominence were to bathe the Earth, well, something like this could happen. And foreign powers are already at play in each other's power grids. It would be seen as an act of war if China or Russia shut down, for instance, New York's power grid for even one day. I am sure that even the Biden administration would order tactical ground assaults on Russian forces in eastern Ukraine, in Eastern Europe. I'm sure that they would. It would be viewed as an act of war. It would not be that you call the diplomat into the office and give him a stern talking to. It would be viewed as an act of war. But whatever the Biden administration does, are you ready for that? And we're not even talking about EMPs here or disasters. We're talking about, a hurricane. We're talking about something like that. Are you ready? Do you have a gas-powered generator and a canister or two of gas? Do you have a transistor radio that works? If all other communications go down, transistor radios probably will not. Do you have a pallet of bottled water? A whole pallet of bottled water, a gallon per day per person. Do you have that? Have you made any attempt at that? A gallon per day per person. So do you have 30 gallons of water? That's not much. Do you at least have that? Do you have food rations or non-perishables that are just on a shelf in your pantry and that you regularly rotate? That is the zeitgeist that this book is tapping into, and I think you'll find it really enjoyable. Although not if you do what Hey Y'all Listen Up did, which is to compare it immediately to Alas Babylon by Pat Frank. This is the last book on his list. This is another post-apocalyptic book, and it's much better than Fortune could do. I'm sure that Fortune would agree with that. It's much better. Hey Y'all Listen Up has read this many times, and he says when he reads one second after, or one day after, or 1 month after, it's impossible not to draw negative comparisons. Well, I agree. I agree. That's kind of unfair. I mean, where would you be if you did that for the rest of your things on your list? There'll always be a better book. Almost always be a better book. Is there an example? Like the Foundation books by Asimov, these massive, century-spanning science fiction epic, that of course has been done better than Asimov did it. I forgot to mention. Oh my God, I don't think I even have a picture of it. No, I don't. That's why I forgot to mention it. Hey, Y'all Listen Up also mentioned The Iron Maiden, which is one of the books in the bio of a space tyrant by Piers Anthony, who'll be familiar to you for The Magic of Xanth. He did a science fiction series called Bio of a Space Tyrant. I read every book in the series. I bet you can guess why. And I do not know why I persisted. Covers or no covers. I don't know why I persisted. They are so bad. They're just so bad. And when you talk about what he's doing in that series, again, a dozen examples of something much better along the same lines will come to mind. Same thing is true here. I don't want you passing on this book completely because it's not as good as one of the greatest post-apocalyptic novels ever written. But anyway, that's all I have. For now, it's just a bunch of booktubers making lists. I thought I would just comment on all of them because it's so much fun. And also, I'll link to the videos, but I also wanted to put the books in front of you in case you don't watch as much booktube as I do. So, because some of them are interesting. The mixes here are interesting. So that'll be it for now. I'll wrap this video up, and I will see you soon. Thank you, booktube.